Hey everybody, welcome to CrazyTechLab, and today is the embargo lift for all of the non-MSRP or overclocked versions of the RTX 5070, which is what we have here. We've got the MSI Gaming Trio Overclocked Edition, so we had to wait today to actually do a review of this card. It is an excellent overclocker, I'll say that straight up. It's absolutely incredible. So hopefully your model will be as well. Obviously there's a bit of a silicon lottery going on there though. With this particular model though, you are not looking at a small card. This thing is absolutely enormous. It's got a massive cooler. It's twice as long as the actual PCB. Easily, but the benefit of that is that it is also extremely quiet and offers plenty of cooling headroom for those overclockers out there. Now, in terms of the actual length, it's well over 300 millimeters. You can see here that it kind of dwarfs the 5090 that I've got. It's another couple of inches long and a little bit wider as well. So you'll want to take that into account when you are building your PC. It is not for small form factor systems. You know, Fractal Design Terra, for example, absolutely no chance of fitting this card in there. What this is though is an overclocked card, pre-overclocked, so you'll get a little bit more performance and even more if you decide to overclock it yourself. So the other half of this review today is our initial 5070 review. So we're going to be comparing it against all of the previous cards that we've tested for the 5070 Ti, 5080, etc. We don't have any numbers for AMD's 9070 series cards today here, unfortunately. We will be bringing those to the channel very, very soon and comparing them, of course, to this card, because this card is going to retail, or, well, we hope, MSRP of $550. A little bit more for this card because it's an overclocked edition, so maybe around $600. But that is the problem here, is that we're not seeing the cards land at the prices that they're meant to be, and that is really killing the reviews and the conclusions. So while this card is great, we'll get to more on that later on. It is really, really good. Even outside of all the frame generation stuff, it does offer a decent uplift compared to 30 series cards. And even a decent uplift over the 4070 and 4070 Super on plenty of occasions as well. If we can't get these cards at the price that we're meant to, then things are always going to struggle. So whether or not AMD is going to be any better with this 9070 series remains to be seen. It could be its killer feature, the fact that it's actually available, not actually available, and available at near the MSRP. So that's all going to be kind of going on out there over the next few days. So you'll want to keep an eye on the other reviews channels if they're commenting on those pricing later on. Make that decision for yourself. Hopefully this card, when the prices are all settled, shouldn't cost much more than $600, but we'll just have to wait and see. So what do we get else with the 5070? Well, it's the first step down from 16 gigabytes for NVIDIA with the 50 series. We've got 12 gigabytes of GDDR7, 192-bit memory bus as well, and obviously this model is pre-overclocked, so do bear that in mind in the results when it comes to the actual benchmarks and also the power consumption figures as well. So that is it for the intro. Going to run through all of the benchmark numbers now, but not before we say thanks again to NVIDIA and MSI for supporting the channel, and also to you guys for watching today. Don't forget to like and comment on this video. It just helps punch me through the algorithm and gets me noticed, and really helps supporting the channel, as does subscribing as well. Really, really helps. And don't forget to turn on those notifications if you do subscribe. So let's crack on with the review. First up, my test system includes all of the latest Windows 11 updates and drivers and BIOS releases and all that kind of stuff. We also have an AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D at the helm, which is water-cooled to remove any kind of thermal throttling. And we also have 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 memory. So first up, we have Assassin's Creed Mirage, and at 1080p we see a little bit of an uplift over the likes of the RTX 4070. The 5070 is also quite a bit faster than the RX 7800 XT, but not really offering a huge amount over any of those cards, it has to be said. And then as soon as we step up to some of the 16 gigabyte cards, we start to see more of an uplift going further up the graph. Stepping up to 1440p, and we have the 5070 matching the 7900 GRE on the minimum 99th percentile, or the 1% low, but the average frame rate was quite a bit higher on the AMD card. Similarly to the previous graph, the 4070 Super, 4070 and 7800 XT not really seeing that much of an uplift, except in the minimum 99th percentile, which was quite a bit higher than all of those cards, especially the RX 7800 XT. Stepping up to 4K now then, and the 4070 Ti manages to better it on the average frame rate and closely match it on the 1% low, while the 4070 Super was just a little bit behind on both. But the 5070 offering a decent uplift over the RTX 4070 and 7800 XT, although you would probably not want to be upgrading from those cards. There's not great value there. Stepping further up the graph, you kind of have to go for some of the graphics cards with much more memory, such as the AMD RX 7900 XT, RTX 4070 Super as well, doing much better here, and the RTX 5070 Ti offering a significant uplift over the 5070. Moving on to an old favourite now then, and it's Counter-Strike 2, and at 1080p, the RTX 5070 doing pretty well, and managing to match the 4070 Ti on the 1% low, but coming up short on the average frame rate, but still offering a little bit extra performance over the RX 7900 GRE, 4070 Super, and quite a bit more performance than the 7800 XT and 4070. You kind of have to go for a 4070 Ti Super to see any kind of significant uplift in performance, and even then it's not really that much. But you kind of have to go way up the graph to see significantly more performance, such as the RTX 5070 Ti. So even at 1080p, that card is still making quite a bit of a difference. Stepping up to 1440p, and it's a pretty similar result. We've got the RTX 5070 just ahead of the 7900 GRE and RTX 4070 Ti, but again, the 4070 Ti managing a slightly higher average frame rate. And once again, you need to step up to something like the RTX 5070 Ti to see significantly more performance here. Finally, at 4K, the RTX 5070 actually doing pretty well here, managing to outstrip the RX 7900 GRE, 4070 Super, 7800 XT and 4070 by increasingly wide margins. But the 4070 Ti still managing to match it quite successfully. The 4070 Ti Super starting to edge ahead, and once we get to the 7900 XT, we're starting to see significantly more performance. And again, the 5070 Ti way out in front there. Moving on to Cyberpunk then, and just at 1080p with no visual trickery going on, no ray tracing, no frame generation, etc. Just standard rasterization. And the RTX 5070 not really performing that great here, not really offering a much better result even compared to the RTX 4070, although the average frame rate was a fair bit higher. The 1% lows didn't really benefit at all. And to see significantly more performance in that card, though, you kind of need to step up to something like the RX 7900 XT, or again the 5070 Ti offering a lot more performance here. Stepping up to 1440 in Cyberpunk was much more favourable for the RTX 5070, just seems like this is where it can actually stretch its legs, and offering a decent uplift over the RTX 4070 and quite a bit of an uplift over the 4070 Super as well, which was surprising there. Closely matching the 4070 Ti Super and the 7900 GRE, but again, if you want to get much more performance than this, the graph is kind of squished in the middle there, perhaps due to memory limitations or bandwidth or something. But to get significantly more performance, you need to step up to something like an RX 7900 XT, and again, the 5070 Ti offering a lot more performance here too. Stepping up to 4K now then, and ultra settings, and we have a pretty good result here for the RTX 5070, but that's no surprise because Nvidia cards tend to like this game. And so even a decent uplift over the RTX 4070 Super down there at the bottom, and the 4070 much faster with the newer model. So a pretty good result here, and you need to step up to something like an RTX 5070 Ti to see significantly more performance here. Turning on ray tracing for the first time in these benchmarks then, and the RTX 5070 starts to struggle at 4K, but that's not surprising because pretty much every other graphics card in the graph starts to struggle as well. A little bit of an uplift over the RTX 4070 Super, but really only the 5070 Ti and 5080 are able to maintain playable frame rates here without DLSS or frame generation being enabled. Now, switching on DLSS and or FSR for all of the cards in the graphs, and pretty much everything here is managing playable frame rates at 4K with ray tracing enabled at ultra settings. So the RTX 5070 pretty much matching the 4070 Super here. So 4070 dropping way back, and even the RX 7900 XT and 7900 GRE just struggling here because of their older technology and just the lack of optimization for ray tracing, which AMD is hopefully addressing in its new graphics cards. Now, if you are interested in frame generation, this is probably one of the graphs for you, because we can see here all of the other frame generation results stripped out, and we've just got the results for the RTX 5070 here, because otherwise, as you'll see in the next graph, things just get hideously complicated and that kind of stuff. So the RTX 5070, kind of middle of the graph without frame generation, and then as we can see, the 1% lows actually start to drop off as you enable more and more frame generation, but the average frame rate goes way up. So you're kind of increasing the performance, but you're kind of not. Some people prefer increasing the 1% lows. The average is kind of neither here nor there. But in general, you will get a smoother experience, especially if you're talking about lower frame rates than what we're looking at here. Starting off at 53 frames per second, you might not notice the difference if you turn on frame generation in this example. So this is the hideously complicated graph that I mentioned a minute ago, and for the simple reason that I've added in the frame generation results for all of the other 50 series and 40 series cards as well. AMD obviously lacking that in this game, but with the 50 series, you've obviously got ×3 and ×4 frame generation, whereas the 40 series, you've only got ×2 frame generation. So that is what we're looking at in this graph. Moving on to Alan Wake now then, and 1080p with max settings, we have the RTX 5070 down the bottom of the graph, pretty much matching the RTX 4070 Super and offering a reasonable amount of uplift over the RTX 4070. Here though, the AMD cards seem to perform a little bit better because we've got the AMD RX 7800 XT kind of out in front of the RTX 5070, so not an amazing result for Nvidia here. So getting a little harder now and stepping up to 1440p, and we have the RTX 5070 leapfrogging a couple of those graphics cards. So again, closely matching the 4070 Super, and finally outstripping the 7800 XT and offering a decent uplift again over the RTX 4070. To get significantly more performance here, again, you're going to have to step up to something like the RX 7900 XT or the RTX 5070 Ti. Stepping up to 4K and also enabling ray tracing this time, and the RTX 5070 actually slips slightly behind the RTX 4070 Super here, but offering a reasonable amount of extra uplift over the RTX 4070 and also beating the RX 7900 XT, 7900 GRE and 7800 XT. So those cards just really not liking ray tracing being turned on. To see significantly more performance here, you're going to have to step up to something like a 4070 Ti Super or the 5080 Ti. So adding in some frame generation now then, and we're sticking with just the 5070 for now. And again, we can see the drop off in the 1% lows as you enable more and more frame generation. So just bear that in mind. The average frame rate obviously increasing massively, so you will get a smoother experience. And you'll probably notice that here down at the lower end where, you know, sort of sub 40 frames per second, moving up to an average of 63 or 90 or 114, you'll probably see an increasingly smooth gaming experience. But this is going to be subjective in terms of what games you play, but in Alan Wake, it's a pretty good feature to have. Moving on to the next graph, and here we've got NVIDIA frame generation turned on for all of the cards that support it. So 40 series cards offer ×2 ray tracing, and any of the 50 series cards, we've got ×3 and ×4 as well. So I hate doing these graphs, but if you want to see how frame generation compares between 50 series cards, for example, this is the graph for you, but it's just very, very messy. There's loads and loads of different results. So yeah, open to ideas as to how you guys want to see this stuff presented in future. Moving on to Black Myth Wukong now then, and we're at 1080p with the cinematic graphics mode and TSR enabled. We have the RTX 5070 sitting right in the middle of the graph, just a little bit ahead of the RTX 4070, offering a reasonable amount of uplift over the RTX 4070, but probably not worth an upgrade there. And looking further up the graph, you've probably got to go again for the RTX 5070 Ti to get noticeably more performance. Stepping up to 1440p, and slightly odd result at the bottom there, the 7900 GRE actually being outperformed by the 7800 XT. Might need to go over and have a look at those results again, but I did retest that and got pretty much the same results. So I don't know whether that's a bug in the game or a driver issue or something. But anyway, the RTX 5070 is performing pretty much the same as the 4070 Super and the 4070, but a lot of the cards kind of squished all the way up really to the RTX 4070 Ti Super at the top there, and again the RTX 5070 manages to edge out quite a bit of a lead, which is where you start to see a little bit more performance. Stepping up to 4K, and once again, the 7900 GRE not really doing that well in this game for some reason, even compared to the 7800 XT, so not sure what's going on there. But anyway, the RTX 5070 sitting right in the middle of the graph, offering a similar performance to the likes of the 7900 XT and the 4070 Super. But to be quite honest, there's 3 or 4 cards either side of that don't really offer that much less or that much more performance. You have to step up to the RTX 5070 Ti to actually get significantly more. So adding in DLSS and ray tracing now then, and it's pretty clear that the RTX 50 series cards do perform quite well in ray tracing, which is kind of what you'd expect because that's what they're optimized for. And the RTX 5070 managing a higher 1% low here than the 4070 Ti Super, but not quite managing to match the latter's average frame rate. Still offering a decent uplift over the 4070 and to a lesser extent over the 4070 Super, but significantly more so than the AMD cards on test. Our final result now then, and we're adding in frame generation to the previous graph. So all of the cards have ×2 frame generation. So here we have the RTX 5070 offering a very, very similar result to the 4070 Super and the 4070 Ti, outstripping all of the AMD cards again, even though they see a bit of a benefit to their average frame rates, just really struggling in this game when you enable ray tracing. And again, to see significantly more performance here, you kind of need to step up to the RTX 5070 Ti. Moving on to a quick overclocking session now then, which MSI was keen for me to have a go at, and I managed to move the memory slider all the way to the right hand side, so in Afterburner at least adding 2000 megahertz to the memory speed, although that doesn't always equate to what you see in GPU-Z obviously. The core slider adding 400 megahertz to the core, and I also opened up the taps on the power limit as well, and this gave some pretty significant increases in gaming performance. The result in games was pretty significant, so we've got a decent uplift for the 5070 when overclocking in Cyberpunk, the 1% low rising from 102 to 120 and the average from 168 to 187. Slightly smaller in Black Myth Wukong, 48 to 51 on the 1% low and 56 frames per second average up to 60 frames per second. So definitely worthwhile doing it. There's probably a lot more in the tank here compared to what I've done. So just a very, very quick overclocking session, but it does look like this is a very tweakable card. So moving on to the power consumption numbers then, and we have to remember that this is an overclocked version of the card, so it's not a straight 5070 or a Founders Edition. We are dealing with a slightly overclocked card, whereas some of the other cards aren't here, but there shouldn't be too much difference. Still, the RTX 5070 drawing quite a bit more power than the RTX 4070, which drew under 200 watts, whereas we're looking at over 270 watts here for the MSI Gaming Trio OC Edition version that we've got. Maybe sort of 20 or 30 watts more than a typical stock speed 5070, but you get more performance with it. So the 5070 Ti drawing around 15-20 watts more, the 4070 Ti Super around 10 watts more, and the 4070 Super, which is a very, very similar card to this one. This is almost just a refreshed 4070 Super, quite a bit more than that one, around 50 watts or so. But again, that card was a Founders Edition model, not an overclocked edition like the one that we've got here. It should also be said that the MSI Gaming Trio was extremely quiet throughout testing. It's very, very large cooler and large fans, not even spinning up until a couple of minutes into a game, and even then they were just kind of ticking over most of the time. So while it's perhaps an excessively large cooler to have on a card at this caliber, it's still a reasonable power consumption coming out of this card, but the fact we've got such a large cooler here does mean that it is able to rein in the noise levels as well and maintain excellent cooling. So that's probably one reason why it's going to be a great card for overclocking. The downside, of course, is that being well over 300 millimeters long, 12 inches or so, it means that you are not going to be able to fit this in some of the smaller systems out there, specifically small form factor and mini ITX. I'd imagine most mini ITX cases would struggle to fit this card. So what do we make of the RTX 5070 and the MSI Gaming Trio OC Edition that we've got here? Well, maybe let's start with the Gaming Trio, this particular card, the Gaming Trio. So I really, really like this card. It is probably way too large for my particular system because I'm usually Mini ITX here, as you know, here on the channel at CrazyTechLab. I love Mini ITX. My Mini ITX my main system has been Mini ITX for quite a long time. This card is just not going to fit in those kind of systems. On the flip side, that big cooler is supremely quiet. The fans barely spin up at all. I was running some benchmarks and noticed that they hadn't moved. So I had to make sure that things were actually going, and yeah, sure, they span up eventually, but they don't get anywhere near full speed. So it's a very, very large cooler, but it's also very, very quiet. So plenty of overclocking headroom, and as we saw in the results, this card is a stellar overclocker. Loads of overclocking headroom that makes a real world difference as well. So depending on the price, of course, as to whether you go over a standard model, the standard models are overclockable as well. It's looking like this is a pretty overclockable card. So that's definitely something to bear in mind with the RTX 5070 compared to a lot of other stuff out there. Now, the 5070 in total, or in general, should I say, is a bit of a mixed bag. I'd say it's definitely worth an upgrade from one of the RTX 30 series models. I've seen other comparisons with a lot more cards on websites such as Tech Power Up and Hardware Unboxed. They've got way more manpower, and you know, those guys are used to doing the massive group tests. And but even here though, there's decent uplift compared to the 4070 on plenty of occasions, and the 7800 XT gets a bloody nose on more than one occasion as well. But it's not to say that the 5070 has it all of its own way. There are situations where it does struggle and doesn't offer the same kind of uplift over previous generation cards such as the 4070 Super and 4070 Ti that you would expect it to. Not that it's a direct competitor for the 4070 Ti. But it's still a decent card if we could get it at the MSRP. That is going to be the key thing here. The 5070 is meant to retail for around $550. If you could get it for $550, based on what I've seen here and other reviews as well, it would be a really good card. But the trouble is, I very much doubt whether even the base model is going to be available for less than $600, which means that cards like this are probably going to cost a lot more, which is just killing the appeal, you know? We want to see these cards somewhere near the MSRP. We don't want to feel like we're in COVID again and dealing with cryptocurrency mining and graphics card prices that are just through the roof and everybody having to make do with a 2-year-old card that they're trying to eke out. You know, no one wants to be in that situation, but that's kind of feels like the situation that we're in at the moment. So that's all I can say for now, really, is that if you can find this thing for anywhere near its MSRP, it's a pretty good choice compared to what we've reviewed so far. But obviously the elephant in the room is AMD. Not the elephant in the room, that's kind of the wrong word, but obviously the card that we all want to see at the moment are AMD's new Radeon 9070 series cards, specifically the 9070, because that is meant to retail for a similar price to the model that we have here. So that is what I want to look at next here on the channel, are AMD cards, and we'll be comparing them to this card in our benchmarks to see which one you should go for. And that will be a direct comparison because we want to test it across as many things as possible, because these cards, for once, actually cost exactly the same price. They have exactly the same MSRP. So as well as the performance, we want to see what they actually land at on retailers' shelves and compare things there and see whether AMD can do a better job than NVIDIA can at the moment. So that's it for me today. Thanks to NVIDIA and MSI for looking after the channel, and thanks to you guys. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Really helps to have your support, helps punch me through the algorithm, gets me noticed and keeps this channel running. And if you want to help keep this channel running, don't forget to check out a lot of the links down below as well. They are affiliate links. I make a small cutback from those, so if you want to buy the card that we've looked at here today, I can highly recommend the MSI Gaming Trio OC Edition RTX 5070. You can find links to those and my Amazon shop in the link in the description down below as well. And if you found this video really informative, you can even buy me a coffee. So thanks for watching today. We'll be back very soon with those AMD numbers. And that's it from CrazyTechLab today. Take care, and I'll see you soon.